My name is Anton Ziska, and today I'm presenting my policy presentation on Ordinance 10.37.010 for the state of Everett, or for the city of Everett. And this presentation is for Heritage University's Addictions class for the Masters in Mental Health program. So let's begin. So we're starting with the agenda. So for this presentation, we're going to be going through an overview of what this ordinance is, how it's impacted certain populations, some research regarding this policy and how it's impacted these vulnerable populations, as well as the way that it has impacted the community as a whole. What SOTA, which is an acronym that we're going to get into, means and looks like in other jurisdictions, some of the strengths and weaknesses of this ordinance, how we as a therapist or as a counselor are able to intervene and understand these stay out of drug areas and advocate for our clients, as well as a personal opinion. Where do we go from here? All right, so an overview of the ordinance 10.37.010. So I'll read off this for now. In the municipal of Everett, Washington, it is unlawful for any person to loiter in or near any thoroughfare, place open to the public, or near any public or private place in a manner and under circumstances manifesting the purpose to engage in drug-related activity, contrary to any of the provisions of RCW chapters 69.41, 69.450, and 69.52. And because of this, any person that's guilty of violating this provision, sorry, I'm plugging my laptop really quick. Any person that's guilty of violating this provision will be charged with a maximum, or with a gross misdemeanor, with a maximum penalty of 364 days, or up to a $5,000 fine. My laptop's charged now. SOTA, which is the stay out of drug area, was first introduced in 2007 in Everett, and now there's up to 9 designated SOTA sites. And this ordinance was particularly for those, like it said, those who were known to be unlawful drug users, possessors, or sellers of drugs. This means someone who is within the knowledge of the arresting officer to have been in possession of illicit substances, who displays the physical characteristics of a person who is intoxicated, who is behaving in a suspicious manner. That creates a lot of ethical dilemmas as well, and a lot of ethical problems as well, implicit bias especially. A person who is displaying physical characteristics of drug intoxication or use, such as having needle tracks in their skin, possessing the drug paraphernalia, behaving in a suspicious manner, flight or having some sort of flight when police officers show up, transferring packages in a very suspicious way. Things that make it suspicious, that make officers believe that there is substance use going on, especially illicit, illegal substance use. Let's see. In addition, the ordinance also is also directed towards loiterers, people who are present in that area, who may be affiliated with gangs, may be affiliated with the substance use in any indirect or direct way. Might be the drug user, might be the possessor, or might be the seller. And through this ordinance, it's prohibited for a drug user who is convicted to be located in this geographical area. Like I said earlier, under this ordinance, there are 9 of these in Everett. So going into this overview, so this is a map of Everett, the city of Everett in Washington. Let's start with the middle graph. So this map focuses on the number of offenses that have been occurring in this area, specifically from January to December of 2020. So offenses include instances where arrests were made, instances where there were documentations of drug-related activity, whether or not there was any criminal charges that were pursued. And again, these are the 9 soda stay out of drug areas that are designated by the city of Everett for people who have been arrested for drug crimes to stay out of. And we see kind of a before and after of the impact of soda, which we'll get into. It's very minimal. In 2021, if we look at the left map, we show a concentration of both 911 calls and calls that were made by officers that are specifically tagged as substance abuse related. Again, the soda is mapped, or the soda areas are mapped in red boxes. So in 2021, there were 1,958 of these calls, and in 2022, you would think there'd be a decrease, but there's actually 3,073. So we'll get into that, but it shows that there is still an increase in drug activity, regardless of if a soda ordinance is put in place. So these maps have shown that there is in fact a heavy concentration of calls in these soda areas related to arrests for substance use. In 2021, the Supreme Court ruled for the Blake decision, which is a state law that led to the plummeting of arrests between 2021 and 2022. However, with the increase of soda areas, the number of arrests drastically increased again. And we are seeing this in data, specifically from city data on fatal and non-fatal overdoses. So one interesting fact was that fatal and non-fatal overdoses hit a 3-year high by 2023. So in 2021, when soda was first introduced as an ordinance, or most recently introduced as an ordinance, there were 90 fatal and non-fatal overdoses in Everett. So there were 90. In 2022, the following year, it did drop down to 72. But by 2023, we saw that by May of 2023, so like not even halfway into the new year, or not even halfway into 2023, we were already at 95 overdoses. So we are seeing that substance use is rising in this area regardless of if soda is in place or not. And all this is ultimately doing is it's pushing people who are seeking these SED services farther away from the places where the substance use services are located, which is predominantly where these soda locations are. And this is hazardous because it's pushing this drug use potentially into residential areas and away from the areas where they are able to receive the services and support that they need. There's also a lot of there's a lot of complications too regarding those who are frequently contacted as well. So individuals who are frequently contacted who have like higher misdemeanors or more frequent misdemeanors are less likely to enter these areas, making it more difficult for them to access the services that they need, or feeling more stigmatized and feeling more hesitant, I guess is a better word, for entering these areas and receiving the services that they need. Ultimately, it's a big step back for them. So some interesting policy research. So this one is out of Oxford University, and it used some of Seattle's data from 2000 soda as an example, which is really fascinating. So there's a study through Oxford in 2009 that concluded that soda areas are counterproductive. They were able to notice that it is expensive, it does not reduce crime, it does not address the underlying conditions of urban poverty. And on top of all of that, especially through interviews with those who were banished from the soda areas, it reveals that their exclusion made their lives and their path towards self-sufficiency much more difficult, because again, they weren't able to access the areas that they needed to access, which was where rehabilitation sites were, where methadone clinics were, sometimes where homeless services were, homeless shelters were, domestic violence shelters, sexual assault survivor centers. not only were these places where they were located, but also they were in between the places that were located. So even something as simple as like transferring buses in a prohibited area ultimately ended up in some people's arrests. Um, others were issued soda. Others who were issued soda orders grappled with the threat of homelessness when preferred shelters suddenly became off limits. The areas that they were potentially going to move to were in a soda designated area, and then they ended up being forced to choose homelessness instead. During the first 3 months of soda in Washington, in Seattle specifically, um, over 50% of those arrested for drug loitering were African Americans, so a disproportionate number of drug users who were arrested were Black in America, or in Everett. Less than 1/3 of the arrests led to actual charges, lending um, lending for an increase of or a decrease of young Black males in downtown streets, uh, which ultimately kind of looks like redlining. Like it looks like it appears as discrimination, and it doesn't address any root cause, and ultimately it just further marginalizes communities, especially communities that are already marginalized and are already like at higher risk for substance use and are desperately needing that substance use support. So I thought that was really fascinating research. This is how soda looks in some other jurisdictions. It's not specific to Everett. It is recognized in many, or soda is practiced in many cities around the country, um, and have very similar results in different areas. So in Kent, Washington, for example, they have the RCW 69.50.4013, which is the possession and use of substances. So that prohibits the use of controlled substances which cannot be in a container other than the one it was originally prescribed in by the physician. And if they're seen with that, there is a large fine or potential for incarceration. Similarly, Washington or Seattle has Seattle Municipal Code, Chapter 12A.21, which is where if a person is in a soda area and is suspected of having substances on them, they're in violation and they're subject to arrest. So Seattle saw 763 drug overdoses in 2023 just because they there wasn't uh, the facilities that they were trying to access were concentrated in soda areas, so they weren't able to access what they needed to, leading to increased overdose and ultimately leading to increased property crimes and increased violence. Similarly, this is seen in Pierce County too. Drug areas that are off limits means that any written order by any court of competent jurisdiction can enjoin a person from entering or remaining in a designated area for drug activity, and this has very similar consequences as well. So looking at some strengths and weaknesses, because there are reasons why this went into place. It was a necessary action by the city to address gun violence, address crime, and address substance use disorder, which was definitely increasing and is still increasing in the city of Everett. The Smith Avenue of Everett has seen fewer drug incidences after countless enforcement operations, and that data comes from the Herald Net with Everett. And they did see a decrease in drug overdoses in an area as a result of this. So that is beneficial, but the weakness, which is kind of brought up earlier, was that it doesn't address the root cause, and it does push people out. It pushes people who are in need of those substance use services towards different areas where they'll use instead, and some of those areas are not where the services are, and they might be in residential areas. So it bans people who are charged it bans people who are charged, not just convicted, but just charged with drug-related offenses from entering certain areas. These areas are really important. Um, it deepens the sense of isolation, it criminalizes their survival, and it increases policing in an already over-surveyed or surveilled, marginalized community, um, causing more trauma, causing stronger anxieties, stronger depression, stronger feelings of shame and hopelessness, and kind of pointing a finger at them. Soda has existed already, and it's been like Seattle already had soda up until 2000 when it was ultimately shut down. And it has already been proven ineffective, and it has already been proven to be disproportionately affecting um, racial and class uh, people who are marginalized. Uh, and the city of Seattle has a detailed racial equity toolkit to see if soda ordinances, the racial equity toolkit is used for all businesses, but soda is supposed to use it to see if it will disproportionately affect their populations too. However, the officer of the inspector general stated that it will not be implementing this racial equity toolkit until the year 2026. The state is out of 2023, so today it's 20, or this year it's 2025, so I'm not sure if this is accurate at the moment, but as of 2023, this is accurate data. When we look at how we as the therapist and we as the counselor are able to come into this, how are we able to intervene? How are we able to show up for our clients during this? Because soda is incredibly marginalizing, and it's scary, and it causes barriers to an already tough problem that they're dealing with. So one of the ways is that we are able to educate our clients on their rights, informing them what soda is, where it's located, and how that will impact them, as well as a way of like providing alternate options for them. Being able to show up for them, centering their lived experience first, and being able to provide that trauma-informed care, the culturally competent care, and holistically listening to them, to collaborate for the betterment of their services so that they are not at risk of falling into discriminatory services from law enforcement. Um, that's really important because most people that we are going to be serving come from either class or racially marginalized backgrounds, people with behavioral health disparities. Um, Educating our clients on harm reduction strategies so that they are able, if they're not able to access these behavioral health services or the services that they need, being able to educate them on how to practice harm reduction, educating them on mutual aid groups that exist in their cities. And then on a more systemic level, like therapists and counselors are supposed to be advocates. We're supposed to be social justice advocates that change the system as well. So being able to attend city council meetings to voice our concerns, pushing for care-based solutions instead of carceral responses, and centering the lives of those who are most impacted by this and will be most impacted by this, centering that in their policy, in these policy decisions when we talk to city council. When it comes to where we go from here, and how I feel about this as a counselor in training, I do believe that soda, stay out of drug areas, are unironically and very intentionally located in areas where there are a lot of behavioral health services, or a lot of substance use services, housing services, services for at-risk and vulnerable populations, and employment and legal aid services. At least speaking within Seattle, that's 15th Avenue and Jackson Street, which has a lot of substance use, even though it is also like it is a soda area, and it causes a lot of irony and a lot of distress. It doesn't address problems, and it disproportionately impacts BIPOC populations, especially in this 15th and Jackson area. There is also it also impacts the freedom of movement, which creates a dangerous rhetoric, turning these drug users or people who use drug into this sort of social scapegoat, being blamed for all of the social ills, kind of othering them from the public. Now, these people who struggle with substance use are no longer the public. They're no longer the citizen. They're seen as this other, kind of this. It's it further marginalizes this already um, marginalized and publicly hated demographic and group, which is really really harmful. It causes a lot of social harm. And finally, it creates safety ultimately comes from improving the funding for these services so that people are able to have a life where they don't need to use substances or where they're able to control their substance use, where they are able to where they're able to manage their substance use and seek the services that they need without this level of fear of policing, of seeing police and running away and then being uh, targeted or assumed to be a drug dealer or drug user or a drug yeah, it's it just creates a lot of marginalization. That safety ultimately comes from funding the correct things, funding organizations, or it doesn't just come from nonprofits, and doesn't just come from philanthropists. This comes from a systemic governmental level, because otherwise we are causing more social harm than social good. So that's how I feel about soda. But I think through showing up for our clients, and through showing up for our clients on not only the personal level but also like the systemic governmental level, that's where safety comes from, and that's where true healing and growth comes from. And with that, thank you. I really enjoyed this project, and here are some of my references.